In this video, we're going to learn about the UI or the user interface of 3ds Max. One thing that you need to know is that the 3ds Max UI is customizable. So when you see other people's UI, you might find them a bit different from your UI or the standard UI, and that is totally fine. For example, you might see other people has a light colored theme, and that your UI may have this default dark color theme. Although dark UI is actually easier on the eyes, especially in the long run. But if you do want to change the UI to the bright color theme, you can go to the Customize menu up here, and then choose Load Custom UI Scheme. After that, a window will open, and you can pick this amylight.ui file, and then click Open. After that, you may need to restart your 3ds Max to apply all of the changes. For now, I will use this default dark color UI. Okay, now let's discuss the UI elements inside 3ds Max. Up here, you will find the menu. This menu is probably the most standard thing among Windows-based applications. Even in Mac and Linux, most applications will have this kind of menu on top of them. Below it, you will find the main toolbar. In this main toolbar, you can find almost all of the common tools when working in 3ds Max, such as the Move tool, Rotate tool, and Scale tool, etc. Below the main toolbar, you will find the ribbon. For now, we're not going to use the ribbon, and this panel actually taking some space on our screen, so we're going to hide this panel. In order to do that, we can click this toggle ribbon button up here in the main toolbar. To turn this back on at later time, you can always click this button again. Okay, now at the left side you will find this Viewport Layout tab, which is in my opinion not very useful and also taking too much of the screen space. So we're going to hide this also. But before we do that, I'm going to show you what this panel actually can do. This panel is used to change the viewport's layout. For example, we can click on this caret button and click in this layout. As we can see, we now have different viewport layout. But again, we will be using maximize-minimize viewport toggle, so changing viewport layout like this is not very important for us at the moment. To get rid of this panel, first we need to switch back to our standard viewport by clicking on this button. Then just right-click in this line symbol at the top of the panel and turn off this Viewport Layout tabs checkbox. Next is the Scene Explorer. This panel is used to display the list of our objects in several different ways. Prior to 3ds Max version 2015, we actually have this in separate panels. We can hide this panel by right-clicking on this line, and then click this Scene Explorer in here. To activate it again, we can click this Toggle Scene Explorer button up here. For now, let's just hide this panel. Now, beside the right-clicking method we used before, we can also drag this top area to undock the panel, and then hit the X button in here. Okay, now this large center area is the viewport. Viewport is like a window where we can see our 3D world from different angles. By default, we have 4 viewports. But if you only see one viewport like this, you are actually inside the viewport maximize mode. If this is the case, just press Alt-W to switch back and forth between 4 viewports layout and 1 viewport layout. If you forget the shortcut, you can just click on this button at the right bottom corner of the screen. As you can see, just like the Alt-W shortcut, this button is actually a toggle function also. So click to maximize the viewport, then click again to go back to the standard quad viewports. If we look closely at each of these viewports, we can see the name of the viewport labeled at the top left corner. This is the top viewport where we are looking at the objects in the scene from the top direction. This is the front viewport, which basically looking at the front side. And this one is the left viewport. And finally, the last one, which looks a bit different from the rest, is the perspective viewport. We're going to discuss about viewport navigation more in depth in the next lesson. Down here we can find the timeline, but in 3ds Max we call it the time slider. In the previous version, it was called the track bar. Well, the naming isn't that important, as Autodesk may come up with different name again in the future release. Essentially, the timeline is used to scrub the time pointer and place keyframes for animation. Because we're not going to learn any animation in this course, we're not going to touch this panel yet. If you want to hide this timeline, we can right-click on this line and then click on this time slider. Or another way to do this, you can also go to the Customize menu up here, Show UI, and then click on this Show Track Bar button in here. Again, timeline, time slider, and track bar, they are all the same thing. So don't get confused by this naming inconsistency. Next, down here you will find MaxScript stuff, status, transformation values, keyframes tools, playback tools, and this area at the far right is for Viewport Navigation. We're going to discuss some of these when the time comes, inshallah. At the right area of the screen, we can find the command panel. So this big panel is called the command panel. This command panel is actually divided into several sub-panels. First, the create panel. This is the panel we need to access when we want to create new objects inside 3ds Max. The second panel is the modify panel. This is where we go if we need to modify existing objects. Then the hierarchy panel, where we can set up pivot point, linking, rigging, etc. The motion panel, where we can set up and manage animations. The display panel, where we can control how 3ds Max display objects. And the last one is the utilities panel, where we can find some helpful functions in different categories. That is all for the introduction. In the next lessons, we're going to focus on some of these UI areas.